Well, what we want to do is, for the record, get your name and your date of birth, where you were born.
Well, my name is Felix Sparks. I was born August 2nd, 1917, in San Antonio, Texas. When I was about 3 years old, my parents moved to Arizona, and I grew up in Arizona, in a mining town, a copper mining town called Miami, Arizona. My father spent his entire life working for a copper company, and that's where I grew up.
How did you get into the service?
Well, when I was a freshman in high school, at the end of my freshman year, Miami is a very small town, but then the only industry there, of course, is the mining industry. Just at the end of my freshman year, came the Great Depression, and the mines closed. And my father was out of a job, along with all other miners and thousands of other people throughout the United States. I traveled around for a couple of months riding freight trains, trying to find a job. I went out to the Atlantic coast, went out to Corpus Christi, Texas, where I had some relatives, tried to get a job on a ship. Well, wasn't any chance of that, but I didn't know that. Then I rode freight trains back to Los Angeles, and other bums told me in Los Angeles, better chance than San Francisco. More shipping out of there, they said. So I rode a freight train to San Francisco. And a guy by the name of Harry Bridges, I just organized a longshoremen's union, I guess they call it, and they wanted like $20 or $30 to join a union. I didn't have any money. I only had just a few dimes left at that time. So in desperation, I ran completely out of money. I didn't have a nickel left. I was trying to figure out how to get on a freight train and somehow make it back home. Well, one morning on Market Street in San Francisco, I was walking along trying to figure out what to do, and a recruiting sergeant came along. He said, "Hey, buddy, you want to join the Army?" Well, I thought about that. He walked on by, and I turned around and said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "You kidding me, buddy?" And I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "All right." He came back and he gave me a streetcar token. And he pointed out a streetcar went up a hill there in San Francisco over to the docks. And he said, "You get on that streetcar with this token, and you go to the docks, and I think it's at something like 2 o'clock, there will be a small boat come in from Angel Island, which is in the bay there, in the San Francisco Bay, right near Alcatraz, I might say, about a mile from Alcatraz. Angel Island at that time was an Army post. So I did. I went to Angel Island, and I was sworn in. And I had a choice to go wherever I wanted to go. The Army was trying to build up then. It was very small at that time.
What year was this?
1941. Wait a minute. No, 1936. 1936. So I decided I'd take what they call foreign service. Foreign service at that time consisted of Panama, Hawaii, the Philippines, and China. So I thought Hawaii sounds a lot nice, so I chose Hawaii. And I got and I had to wait there. Then a couple of times a year, the Army sends a ship from New York all the way through the Panama Canal and picking up and taking recruits to these various places. I had to wait a month or so, and then a ship came in from New York. I went to Hawaii, and then on to the Philippines and China. And it was a kind of a slow ship, but it took us 7 days to make it to Honolulu from San Francisco. At that time, they were building the bridge across the bay of San Francisco. And when I got back, it was finished. Anyway, I went to Hawaii and took recruit training. Got assigned to a unit and took my recruit training, and now I was a soldier. $21 a month.
In the infantry?
No, artillery.
Artillery.
I was in the Coast Artillery. We had big guns that we were supposed to defend. 8-inch guns, 16-inch guns, big stuff. Which was actually obsolete. We didn't realize it. Nobody seemed to think about the airplanes in those days. So my old regiment never fired a shot, of course, during World War II. Neither did any other Coast Artillery unit, because of the airplanes. All the damage was done by airplanes. So most of the troops in Hawaii never fired a shot when the Japanese hit there. Of course, the Japanese didn't invade. Actually invade, they just bombed us and left. So anyway, I got to be a corporal, $42 a month. And I discovered, one day I bought a camera from some soldier for $2, a little old box camera. And I took some pictures. Soldiers took a lot of pictures in Hawaii, a lot of scenery, and then I discovered I couldn't get them developed on the post. The pictures, I had to take them downtown to Honolulu, which was 9 miles away. We had bus service every hour from the post. The post was Fort Kamehameha, which was at the mouth of Pearl Harbor. We were called the Harbor Defenses of Pearl Harbor, only 9 miles from Honolulu. So I got to thinking about that, and I thought, boy, maybe I could make some money. I was desperate to make some money, because I knew my parents were never going to be able to help me. I was the oldest of 5 kids. I was desperate to make some money to go to college. That was my dream all the time. So I went down and bought a book about photography from Eastman Kodak shop in Honolulu. Read it. And I asked the company commander if he could get me an appointment with the Post Exchange Council. Post Exchange is, like a big general store on an army post. And he said, yeah, he'd get me an appointment. I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to open up a photography shop. He said, yeah, I think I can arrange that. The battery commander was a captain. And he did. A week or 2 later, he came in, and by that time, I was the battery clerk then. I moved up pretty fast because one day the first sergeant says, can anybody type? Just by happen chance, I took typing in high school. So I held up my hand, and I was the battery clerk. And I could always write well. I was editor of the high school paper. So I could write letters for the captain, and I could see he was very pleased with whatever I wrote for him. I just did all the work in a orderly room. And very quickly, I got promoted to corporal, $42 a month. Well, I got the appointment with the Exchange Council, and I told them I was an experienced photographer. I didn't know a damn thing about it, except what I read in the book. And they said, well, I thought that was kind of interesting. And a week or 2 went by, and they called me over and said, okay, what do you need? I said, you got to build me a shop. I don't have any money. You'll have to loan me the money to buy equipment, and you take whatever, Post Exchange will handle it, and they can take whatever percentage they want. Well, they agreed to that. They said they would take, Post Exchange would take 15%. I would have gladly given them 50%. And they went ahead and, well, I don't know, they said, you got to give us a blueprint of how to build a shop. So I beat it down to Honolulu and got a hold of the guy that owned the Eastman shop down there. Told him my problem, and said, if you can draw me up a plan of how to build a photography shop, I'll buy all my equipment and my supplies from you. I said, okay. A week later I went by, he had a plan drawn up, and I went by and gave it to the council, and they built the shop. And suddenly I was in business. And I really struggled because I had never done that before. I had to do everything by hand. We didn't have any automatic equipment in those days. And boy, I was getting all kind of film, getting all kind of business. And I'd work till 1 or 2 o'clock every night. I couldn't get off in the daytime because they had regular drill, but at night, as soon as the evening meal was over, I'd go over to the shop and pick up the film that the Post Exchange had taken in and develop it. And pretty soon I had to hire a guy to help me. Before I left there, I had 3 other guys I'd hired to help me. I was really turning out to work. And I was making about $200 a month, which was as much as a battery commander made, see? And I was putting it all in postal savings, I think, which paid 2% in those days. And I was accumulating money. And when my enlistment was over, I had several $1,000s. I came home, went to college, just that simple. And college didn't cost much. It cost about, in those days, I went to the University of Arizona. The fees for the semester at that time were $35. Then I had a friend who was in the outfit who was drafted with me. He was from the university. He was from Tucson. And he came on home on leave, and he came back and said, Mary and my girlfriend are going out with guys now. I did it. So I called her on the phone and said, let's get married. Long before I did that. He hesitated a while. Said, all right. And she had a year to go. We were going to get married at the end of our junior year when school was out. So I got to leave and went home. We got married right at the end of the school year.
This was before you went overseas?
Oh, yeah. Before the war.
Uh-huh.
And had an agreement. I wanted her to get a degree, that she would go on back to school and finish senior year. And then she'd join me wherever we were. And she went back to school, and my division moved to New England, Massachusetts in the meantime. And as soon as she graduated, she joined me in New England and stayed with me until we shipped overseas.
Did you write her a lot of letters when you were overseas?
Quite a few. Yeah.
Do you still have any of those letters?
I think I threw away everything we had. Yeah, we wrote quite a few letters. V-mail.
Right.
Short letters, V-mail. And she had a baby about 2 or 3 days after we sailed. And I never saw the baby until he was 2.5 years old. That weighed on my mind more than anything else. Was leaving her with a little baby. That really weighed on my mind a lot. That boy's now, he's in his 50s. Wasn't here just a little while ago. But that's how I presume we would have gotten married if we, anyway.
Accelerated the process a little bit, a little competition.
Sure. I didn't see how I could get married, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I was putting myself, I never got a dime's help from anybody. I worked 6 hours a day in college, and then the money I saved in the Army, I was doing all right, but I couldn't support a wife. Particularly, I had 4 more years to go. Law school is 7 goddamn years. Ridiculous, but it's the way it is. I could have gotten through in 3 or 4 just as easy.
So your enlistment time was over.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to college. Where were you on December 7th, 1941?
All right. I decided I'd better get somehow or other we were having trouble at that time with Japan, even when I was over there, you know. When I was in Hawaii, the Japanese sunk the gunboat Panay, an American naval vessel, on the Yangtze River, bombed it, and killed practically all the sailors. Well, the Japanese were just trying us out. We went on an immediate alert in Hawaii and all over the Army. That was it. We went on an alert for a few days. The Japanese more or less apologized. They said, oh, that was just an accident, that they killed all those sailors. And we let it go. But it got the United States, got the Congress thinking, I better really get going. Well, I decided I'd get a commission, so I did. I took some courses and I went to a special school at Fort Huachuca, Arizona in the summertime. They had a program called Citizens Military Training Camp. You went 4 summers and you didn't get any pay, but 4 summers and some correspondence courses, you could get a commission as a second lieutenant. So that's what I did. I got a commission shortly after I got my commission. Well, I got it in February of 1940, I guess it was. And then Congress passed a Selective Service Act in August of that year and started the draft. Well, immediately I got drafted. I wasn't a draft exactly. I just got a notice that I was ordered to active duty. And my orders read, you're ordered to active duty for a period of 1 year, not to exceed 1 year, unless sooner relieved. That's the way the orders read. Turned out to be 5 years. But anyway, in January of 1941, I got orders to report to the Army. And I just happened to be assigned to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and the 157th Infantry, and a National Guard outfit, had been mobilized. And I was assigned to that regiment as a second lieutenant. So my year would have been up. I had about 9 or 10, I had more than that. I had almost 11 months in. My year was almost up when Pearl Harbor occurred. So I was a member of the 157th Infantry Regiment when Pearl Harbor occurred, not ended any chance of getting out after 1 year. So that's how I got stuck for 5 years. They didn't let anybody out from there on.
Did you, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, there seemed to be a real surge of patriotism. Did you feel this? Did you feel this too?
Well, yes, of course we felt it. We were, I don't know, I'm sure our thinking was a little muddled. But we trained harder. And we knew we had to learn our job and learn it well. So we really started training very, very intensively. And we didn't have any idea when we were going to get into combat, but we knew we were going to do it sooner or later. And of course, as you know, as a result of Pearl Harbor, the stupid Mussolini declared war on the United States. See? And then Germany followed. Well, the United States didn't have any quarrel with them at that time, so they brought disaster on themselves, starting with Mussolini. And then now the United States was at war with everybody. And we just had the capability greater than any nation in the world. I don't think anybody really appreciates the industrial capacity that we have. God, we could turn out tanks and airplanes and ammunition by the ton and by the thousands, far better than any other country in the world, except Russia. We constantly, everybody underestimated Russia all the time. Thought they were backward, dumb people. Turned out they weren't so dumb or backward either. Anyway, we just outproduced everybody almost overnight. And suddenly we had a very formidable army. And good many, we outnumbered everybody else except Russia.
Let me ask you one thing about the training that you were going through. Because one of the questions that constantly gets asked, is there any way that you can actually prepare for combat? I mean, what does that training, how does that training prepare you for the first combat you saw, say, in North Africa?
All right. How we prepare is we do a lot of maneuvering, field maneuvering, sometimes 2 or 3 days at a time, living in the field, and did a lot of firing of the weapons, and a lot of physical training. For instance, just before we went overseas, we were undergoing 50-mile marches, day and night. Start out in the late evening and march all night long, with a break every hour. So we were really tough physically. And as I say, we were training every damn day on the weapons. So we were just in good shape. And we were never, American soldiers never had any really fear of the Germans or anybody else. Pretty cocky, you know, American soldiers. Just pretty cocky. We never had any real, we knew that, we thought the Germans were better soldiers than we were, but we weren't afraid of them at all. And everything was simulated combat. You know, we had people making out like they were Germans. We fought an enemy all the time with our own troops, down a different headgear or something. And we'd maneuver against them night and day. And the training was brutal. But we learned pretty fast. In our case, we had over a year of training before we went into combat. We had an advantage over a lot of new units that came in later.
Right.
Went in with 6 months training. We had almost 2 years.
So when did you ship overseas? When did you get your orders to ship overseas?
We got our orders in 43, June of 43, because we were overseas 2 years, a little over 2 years. We got shipped to North Africa out of Virginia.
And at this time, you're now a second lieutenant, a first lieutenant?
Captain.
Captain.
I was promoted pretty rapidly after war was declared. At the time we went overseas, I was a captain.
And you were in a rifle company?
No, I was the adjutant.
Okay.
I was on the regimental staff. And when we went overseas, I had been in a rifle company all the time. But the colonel somehow or other selected me to be on his staff, and I became what we call a S1, which is the adjutant. There are 4 major staff officers in each staff. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I was a 1. We went overseas then, and I was a captain. And The time we got to North Africa, he was all over there. The battle was won already, and Rommel had been kicked out of North Africa, primarily because of the British. Fought a hell of a battle over there. Of course, we helped quite a bit at the latter part of it. But we were just a reserve unit going in for North Africa. Well, by the time we got there, it was all over.
So there was you didn't see any combat in North Africa?
We didn't see any combat at all. And when we got there, Patton had taken over. Most people don't remember what happened there, but Eisenhower went up remarkably fast. I think he was only a lieutenant colonel. When the war came along, he went up remarkably fast. And he was in North Africa. And one reason was his ability to get along with the British. Matter of fact, we always thought the British ran him. That was the thought of the American Army. Wasn't quite the case, but pretty much the British General Staff pretty much dictated the course of the war. There's no mistake about that. Anyway, Eisenhower suddenly became the commander-in-chief. And when we made the invasion, there was a man called Friedendahl, lieutenant general, who commanded the American troops when we first invaded North Africa. Nobody remembers Friedendahl. In the first battle, we got the hell kicked out of us, called the Battle of Kasserine Pass. And that made Eisenhower mad, and more than that, it made the Chief of Staff, Marshall, of the United States, mad. And Friedendahl got sacked. Nothing was ever heard about the man after that. And Patton was put in command. So when we got to North Africa, Patton had taken over. Oh, blood and guts. And we just landed in North Africa. We were only there a few days before we went on. We were one of the assault divisions of Sicily. And there was American Army was stationed at various, there are all kind of port cities in North Africa. Bizerte, Casablanca, Oran, Algiers. American troops stationed at all those places and loading out of those places. At that time, that was the largest naval convoy ever assumed or put together in the history of the world. Had like 1,000 ships. See, in the convoy that invaded Sicily.
Was it Operation Torch they called it, or what was it?
What the hell did they call it? I can't remember what they called it. I've forgotten.
No.
But Patton had taken over anyway. And he went up and down the coast. He assembled all the officers at every port city. He assembled all the American officers, someplace where he could talk to them. In our case, in North Africa, they have a lot of places, big, dry ditches like streams. They're dry streams.
Mm-hmm. Dry beds.
Dry beds. One time it rained a hell of a lot in Africa, but the rains had stopped 1,000 years before. And they called these places wadis. That was the African word, it was wadis. Well, in our case, our division, we got collected together in one of those wadis. It had sides on it, and they put looked like a boxing ring in the bottom down there with loudspeakers strung around on the side of the wadi. And Patton and Bradley was the second command, spoke to us. And I've never seen that quoted correctly to this day. Never has it been quoted correctly. what he said to us, and I can almost give you word for word. He said, "Gentlemen, in a few days we're going to hit the mainland of Europe for the first time." He says, "Most of you have never been in combat before, and you may be afraid, but don't be afraid. You can stick a red feather up your ass and run around in front of them, and they can't hit you." Those were the exact words. And he said, "If they want to surrender before we hit the beach, let them surrender. But if they don't surrender before we hit the beach, kill the bastards." Those were his exact words. I've never seen them quoted.
Well, we're going to have it now for the record here.
Well, there was some rumors about that. It got around, of course. And
Do you need some water or something?
no. And Bradley was there. And Bradley got up and made a very restrained speech. Both these speeches were very short, 5-10 minutes. Bradley got up and said, "Well, you want to emphasize the proper use of artillery and firepower and fire movement and so on, all infantry stuff." And then Bradley wrote 2 books. I have them here. In one of those books, he said he'd heard about Patton making the statements about kill the bastards, but he said he wasn't there. To hell he wasn't. Those guys don't hesitate to lie a lot, I'll tell you that. He was a good officer. Bradley was a good officer. And Patton was different than anything we had in the American Army. He didn't mind taking chances. Got us in a lot of trouble at that time. But in many ways, he was something that the American Army needed. I say he wasn't afraid of gambling. Who got killed in the meantime was no concern of his. And then you recall, then we made the invasion of Sicily, wrapped it up in about 30 days or so.
That's when you saw your first combat, was then?
That was the first combat.
Let me ask you this. What were your expectations? You're hearing Patton tell you, kill the bastards. What were your expectations? What did it feel like when you first experienced combat? What was that like?
Well, we had done it over. We had done it over and over. We were landing from big ships, ocean liners that the Navy commandeered during the war. And these were regular ocean liners, passenger liners. And we unloaded from them by crawling down nets. It was a hazardous operation into small boats, and 7 miles out, and then hitting the beach. Well, it was sort of exciting, but it was almost just like another training exercise. We didn't really get worked up about it at all. And when you get used to, when you resign yourself to something, you don't feel any different hardly than you ever did. Some people think people get all excited. That's not so. You just don't feel much different. You know you're trained for it, and you know you're going to be successful. So you don't really worry about it.
Did being an officer have anything to do with this kind of attitude?
No, I think that's right down to the privates. I felt the same way. Being an officer obviously has its advantages, also has its disadvantages. Officers in an infantry rifle company were killed more frequently on a percentage basis than the enlisted men.
So when the invasion of Sicily began, were you now back in the rifle company again?
No, I was still the adjutant.
Okay.
I was still the adjutant. And my job was to locate the command post and take care of personnel, casualties, bury the dead, and things like that. All I do with personnel. When the campaign was over, I got very dissatisfied with being on a staff. I wanted a rifle company. So I bugged the colonel about getting a rifle company. He kept saying, "No, you're doing all right where you are," he'd say. And the campaign was over, I kept bugging him, and one day we were going to invade now Italy. Well, we started having graded tests, what we call graded firing tests. That is, we'd tack up a hillside, all hills in Sicily. Sicily ain't nothing but one goddamn big mountain and little beaches running around it. We did some graded test firing tests, live firing tests. And one of the companies flunked the test for some reason or other. The old man comes stomping in that evening, and after this company had fired his, flunked the test, he said, the E Company flunked their test. All right, Sparks, God damn it. This was you asked for it. You go take it over, and you run them through that test tomorrow morning, and they better pass. I just picked up my gear, didn't have hardly anything. Went down and got the non-commissioned officers together and had a little meeting. Find out what the problem was. Hell, they were good as anybody. I discovered they had a great dislike to their company commander. And I said, well, that may be, but I hope we all get along fine, I said. And I mean, the non-commissioned officers are really the backbone of any company. And I said, we're going through that tomorrow morning again. And if we flunk, some of you sergeants are going to be privates. So I said, don't worry, Captain. We won't flunk it. Went through the next morning, no problem at all. From there on, then I was the company commander. Went in and made the invasion of Salerno. I was the E Company commander. Had the E Company the whole Italian campaign. And I loved that. I loved the rifle company. First place, a lot of action.
Let me ask you about that, because most people, especially if when they're drafted, they're going to try to avoid the rifle companies and so on. But you wanted the action. You wanted to be in the thick of it.
Right. I wanted the action. I've been trained as an infantry officer. I've been my training. I'm a graduate of the infantry school, officer school.
So this is what you were trained to do.
That's what I was trained to do. And the thing that I loved about it, you have 192 men in a rifle company. If you on the ball at all, you get to know every goddamn one of them, which I did. I have a phenomenal memory in the first place. And I learned the names of every goddamn man in my company in short order. And I get a chance when we're out of the line, I talk to some of them. I'll find out something about their home life, where they were from, things like that. And just had a wonderful relationship with the men in my company, which I never had with any higher command, because, you know, my next command was a battalion. That's 1,000 men. Well, that was beyond me. I couldn't learn all of them. I learned a lot of them, but I just loved the rifle company. An intimate feeling, and I suppose to this day, many times I've sat down and thought about it. We attacked, the whole American Army was on the attack all the time in Europe. We would attack when we in the positions, in the German position, we knew we were going to get a lot of men killed, wounded. We knew that. And I kept thinking, well, why did they go? Why did they go? Oh, that has really baffled me. There's something about the Americans, there is a feeling of comradeship and a feeling of unity, but it's hard to explain why men know they don't know they're going to get killed, but they know some of them are going to get killed or wounded, and why they don't hesitate. I never had men hesitate. When I said, let's go, we went. As I say, I can't understand it, not to this day.
Some people describe this experience, particularly in a rifle company, of being so close that you probably get closer to these guys than you even get to your wives later on in your lives.
Well, that's not exactly right, but in a sense that's true. I suppose one reason we're so successful with these annual reunions. We're still very close together. And the men have a tremendous respect for me, everybody that I served with, because I was just like one of them. Well, I was an enlisted man, you see, at one time, so I've been through the whole, I had an advantage over a lot of people. I had the whole experience. And I never was afraid of God or anybody else. Fear never bothered me.
But you did have fear at times.
Well, a lot of times I had, let me say, a lot of apprehensions. Mostly about what was going to happen to my men. Sometimes we got in tight spots, and I had a lot of apprehensions, and I'm trying to frantically figure out how we're going to get out of this. But I can always think fast and act fast. So combat really never bothered me. All I was goddamn glad when it was over. When the war was over, I only weighed about 130 pounds. I was just skin and bones, getting only maybe 4 hours sleep a night.
What was the worst combat you saw in Italy? Was it Anzio?
Yeah, Anzio, yeah. See, I lost my whole company there. We got cut off 7 days. We got cut off by the Germans. Practically our whole battalion was lost. And only me and one other soldier came out from E Company, the sergeant and I. And we just kept at it, trying to get out. They had us cut off. And we got out one night. There was about 8 of us left when we tried it, and only 2 of us made it. We had to go through the German lines. But we made up our minds we were going to get killed rather than get captured. So 2 of us made it. And that was a terrible, terrible, terrible blow.
Do you remember what it felt like at the time?
Well, at the time, I got to where I didn't care anymore. You get to the point where you just don't care. You don't have any particular emotion about it. You just don't care. You get killed, okay. If you don't. But you get to the point where, in many cases, that you don't care. You just don't care. But you're always trying to do your job. You know you got to care. The war is going on, so you want to continue to help carry it on. But otherwise, you have no particular feeling about it. I never worried about getting killed. I was wounded twice.
For what action did you receive the Silver Star?
Anzio.
Was it Anzio?
Was one of them, yeah. I got 2. Anzio was one.
What did the commendation read? I
don't know. I haven't paid. Awards meant absolutely nothing to me. I'm sure I got it around here somewhere. But I don't really know. And I got another one at Reipertswiller, which was the worst battle of the war, even worse than Anzio.
So how long after Anzio was this? After the Italian came, did you fight your way up the peninsula, or how did you get to France?
Well, the Germans tried to make the big breakthrough after we'd been on ashore at Anzio about a week. They threw everything they had at us, and they took a hell of a... We had a lot of artillery, we had a lot of weapons, flat ground, and we slaughtered them. We lost a hell of a lot of people too. So they finally broke off after about a week. They just didn't seem to have the strength. They had moved us back several miles. But we backed up, but we never broke. And when a hell of a lot of us left. But the Germans finally, when it appeared that they had the battle won, they quit, which was quite customary, I might say, with the Germans. This is the point when we thought they had us whipped, they would break off. Well, that's the real reason was, I think, they just had so goddamn many casualties. They didn't have new people to put in.
At this point in time, as you're going through this, you're losing men. Do you hate the enemy?
No, never had any hate at all for the Germans, none at all. We just felt like the poor bastards were caught like we were. Mm-hmm. We never had any hate for them. There was, except one occasion, and that was in Dachau. There, men demonstrated some hate there.
Yeah.
It's the only time.
Let's wait on Dachau for a bit. After Anzio, where did you go from there?
Well, we finally, along in May of that year, we'd been there like 4 months on Anzio. They brought in a lot of fresh troops. We got a couple of new divisions on Anzio. Then they brought several new divisions down south. You see the whole 7th Army and the British First Army were being held up on the what the hell is that? Chapel?
Monte Cassino.
Monte Cassino. Well, Monte Cassino was actually just, there was a river valley, the Leary River, ran down through, it was a big broad valley. Monte Cassino was on the other side, we were on the other side, and we made several attacks, and they had the high ground, of course, and we had to attack down through the valley and then shoot the hell out of us. And we finally just couldn't do it. But finally they brought in more divisions there in the spring. It was in May, I guess. Yeah, May. They made a big attack down in the Leary Valley, British 8th Army, American 7th Army, and we made the attack then out of Anzio. We all attacked simultaneously, and we broke through in all places. By that time, we just had the Germans worn down, and none of that, they were losing. Russia was really killing the Germans. They just had so damn many forces committed in Russia. They couldn't support both operations. So we finally broke out then in May. It took us about two days to break out of Anzio, 2 or 3 days. It was very bloody the first day because we were going right into the teeth of the German defenses. But in 2 days we broke through and we took Rome. And the 7th Army broke through down below, and the Germans did a retreat from the whole Italian theater up to the Alps mountain, the Italian Alps. They made their last stand at the Italian Alps, which were just impossible to fight over. And there they stayed till the war was over, what was left of it. They had no business in Italy in the first place. They should have never been there. What the hell that Hitler was dumb. They just wasted men and resources in Italy. No reason to hold it at all.
You've broken out of Anzio, and Rome has been liberated. The Germans have been pushed back to the Alps.
Right. All right.
Where's 157th then?
All right, we get just above Rome, and we were stopped, and we were sent back. And we were relieved, taken out of the line, and sent back to Naples to prepare for the southern France invasion. See, our 45th Division had been pretty experienced in amphibious operations and a long time in combat. So we were one of the units picked to go to southern France. So we're shipped back to Naples and went in training there then for the southern France invasion. While I was there, I got promoted to battalion commander. And so we trained like hell to invade in southern France. We had beautiful aerial photos of all the beaches. The Air Force did a tremendous job of getting low-level photography. We could see everything on the beach, We could see people on the beach, machine gun emplacements and what the hell have you. So we had good intelligence, and we knew about how many Germans were there. And we had to estimate our casualties. For an amphibious operation, you have to estimate your casualties so that the Army can have adequate replacements. Because you're figuring on very heavy casualties, of course. Like Normandy or any beach, you got very heavy casualties. You're in a very vulnerable position. Coming in on some goddamn boats, and Germans shooting at you all the way. We estimate our casualties at 20%. That's the whole 7th Army. As it turned out, we didn't have more than 5%. Figured a hell of a lot. It came out a hell of a lot better, mainly because the Germans were running out of troops. They just couldn't cover all the territory, and we had them outnumbered in tanks about 4-1. Had them outnumbered in people, and we crushed them pretty fast in southern France. First day, my battalion we made 5 miles. We got ashore 5 miles ashore, which is a damn good gain for the first day. Got us off the beach. The critical thing is to get off the beach, because that's where the kill area is. They got their artillery and everything else zeroed in on the beach. So the kill area is on the beach. Well, we cleared that rapidly. My battalion, we went right on in, took very few casualties. The first night we were 5 miles inland. And the German resistance was broken. From there on, they started forming up. But they did a general retreat at that time and to the Vosges Mountains. And that turned out to be the bloodiest fighting of the war. Mountains are difficult to fight in. Very, very difficult. And those Vosges Mountains were very steep. And of course we were there during the winter. Snowed a lot. Mountains are easy to defend. A lot of trees and brush. You can't see very far, and they were dug in well camouflaged. Boy, we were lucky to make, in many cases, 300 or 400 yards in one day. It was tough fighting. Not to mention the goddamn weather. I got to where I hated snow and ice. We were cold. American Army was very poorly equipped for winter fighting. We just didn't have winter clothing. I don't know what people were thinking of here in the States, like it didn't get cold in Europe, you know. We just didn't have proper equipment, and we were cold all the time. Very slow progress. We made fast progress for the first month, and after that, the Germans got dug in the Vosges Mountains. That was a different war entirely. Not to ignore the fact that we were in Alsace, which is an area where the people speak both German and French. And most of the towns and the streets had German names, because Alsace has been occupied off and on over the centuries by both the French and the German. So a lot of the people there had kids in the German army. It had been occupied by Germany, of course, after Hitler took France. And we didn't trust the people. So we never knew where we were getting it from. And German patrols would slip in and put out mines everywhere on all the roads. And they gave us more trouble. Under the snow, hell, you could just be 8 or 10 inches of snow and bury the mines in the snow. You couldn't see them. That was tough fighting. And that was the worst experience of my life. The fighting was in the Vosges Mountains.
Why was it the worst?
Well, first place, the weather and the terrain. So easy to dig in on the side of a mountain, you know, and you cover up your foxhole with tree limbs or what have you, brush and leaves. Very difficult to see. And have to get right on top of the goddamn Germans before you really got into a heavy firefight. And a lot of small arms. We took more small arms casualties than any other place in the war within the Vosges Mountains because of very close fighting. And then we finally broke through. We got into Christmas Day, or day before Christmas. We crossed the German border, 1944. And then the Germans started the Battle of the Bulge. And they wiped, they broke through our positions way off on our left, 100 miles away from us. And we were ordered just to hold fast, not to go moving. They took some of our troops, some of our units, and sent them over to the Bulge area to help out, so left us very, very thin. My battalion didn't have anybody on the right or left. I was just out there by myself. And finally, the Germans got stopped at the Bulge. And they started another attack, which nobody has ever heard about, I don't think. Although there's been a book or two written about it. What they call Operation Northwind. And they attacked then into the Alsatian area. And they broke through our troops. Drove in 10 or 15 miles. And I'm up in Germany at that time. I suddenly get orders to get the hell out of Germany and get back, and they sent me some trucks up. Got the battalion on trucks, and we went back. And then we had orders, when I got back, I had orders to attack the next morning the German penetration. So I did. And I took the objective, the hill ridge they gave us, a mountain ridge. I took it. I was the only goddamn battalion in the division that did. and we were suddenly sitting up there by myself, you know. And the Germans then surrounded us. So I asked the division commander, or radio, I asked him permission to withdraw and set up a defense along with the troops that were still in place. Word came back, to withdraw would show signs of weakness. We were as weak as we could be. Permission denied. I was furious. Well, with good reason, we got wiped out. My command post was dug in the side of a mountain, and we fought for 7 days. Of course, couldn't get supplies up, didn't have any replacements, couldn't evacuate our casualties. Finally, on the 7th day, finally in desperation, I requested a platoon of tanks. The idea, there was some narrow trails that went up logging trail that went up the side of this mountain, covered with snow and ice. I was going to try to break through with those 4 tanks, with a platoon of tanks, and get up on position, and then lead the troops back out. Well, I tried it, and we got about halfway up. We got into the German positions and hit the tank I was in. Didn't hurt any of us, but it knocked out the main gun, the turret. Knocked off the burlet. There's a brass ring that the turret rotates on. Knocked the gun turret off with a 75 gun on it. Knocked it off that ring, and we couldn't use the gun. And the tank behind me, it was all right. Instead of 4 tanks, they sent me up 2. They said that's all I had left in the platoon. Now that was a moment of decision. I was standing up we were right in the German positions, firing like hell, except we couldn't fire the main gun. And we were into where some of my troops had been, and I looking around, I had 3 wounded men lying on the ground, and I finally decided, hell, I'm going to get those men. I don't care if they kill me or not. So I got out, and I yelled at the Germans. I said, go ahead. I said, shoot me, shoot me. You know, the bastards never fired a shot at me. I went up, the first man was only about 50 yards away, or the farthest one. I went up and got him. He was shot through the chest, and still alive. Kind of a heavy kid, and I couldn't carry him, but I could drag him. I drug him back to the tank, and then the tank sergeant got out and he helped me lift him on the bow of the tank. The other 2 weren't far away, and I got them, put them on 3 of them on the tank. German never fired a shot, not one shot. Unbelievable. Then we backed down. We had to back them. We couldn't go any further. The treads are no good on us. No, or ice are worthless. A tread vehicle is worthless on ice. The treads just spin. We couldn't go any further. So all we could do was back down. So we backed down the mountain with those 3 men on the front of the tank. I don't know whether 2 of them lived all right. I'm sure one of them had a broken leg, and I kind of put some tree limb, a splint, and ammunition belt, and wrapped up his leg. Yeah, the guy shot through the chest, I don't know. I never did hear how they came out, because once they gone through the medical system, we drop them from our rolls, you see. We never know how wounded come out.
Did battalion commanders usually engage in this kind of up close and personal kind of?
No, but I always did. I was right with always. I felt if I'm going to command, I got to be where the fighting is. Otherwise, I couldn't stand to sit back on a command post and try to figure out what's going on. I got to be there. I got to know what's going on. Nobody's going to tell me they can't do this or can't do that. So I was always up with one of the lead companies, always. And my executive officer then ran the command post. But I was the only battalion commander in our regiment, at least, that stayed up at the front all the time. And I was just lucky. Pure luck. I got hit twice, spent a couple of months in the hospital, and that was it. Shot through the gut here once. That was the only bad wound I got.
Was it a rifle wound or a shrapnel? Or?
Shrapnel. I would say that probably 80% of all casualties in combat are caused by shrapnel. It's the artillery that's the killer. Because they get you at long range, you know, how guns can be 3-4 miles away and get you. So the artillery is the biggest killer, at least in World War II. That was the #1 killer by far. The same way with it, we had a lot of artillery. The Germans had a lot of artillery. Each battalion had a battery of artillery supporting it. I had a 105 battery, and they were with me all the time. And every battalion had an artillery battery. And we had forward observers from that artillery battery with each rifle company that could direct the fire right from the front line position. We didn't learn that until the war was about 6 months old. When we first went into combat, they had stationary, what they call stationary OPs. Had some artillery officers way in back of us somewhere, in a farmhouse or somewhere, trying to direct fire. That didn't work at all. Finally, we got smart and put those forward observers, a forward observer team with each rifle company. And about 4 men, an officer and 3 other men, and what we call a forward observer party. And they were with the unit all the time. Took casualties.
My father was in a forward observer unit for a while.
They took same casualties as the infantry. Well, they weren't actually firing rifles. They were right in the combat area all the time.
So once the tank is back down the hill, how did you break out and get across into Germany again?
Well, our whole regiment took a beating. We lost 5 full rifle companies. 5 rifle. We got 9 rifle companies. We lost 5 complete, including all of mine. 3. I have 3 rifle companies, and lost all 3 of them complete. Well, I have about 30 days. They bring in. We stopped the German advance, obviously. They couldn't go any further either. Then a new unit came in and relieved us, but the fighting was over. Germans didn't try anymore. I had 30 days to whip about 700, 800 new recruits into shape to go back into the line. They transferred some sergeants and some officers from other units to me. And in about 30 days, we were back in combat, same as ever. From there on, the war, we finally broke in the Battle of the Bulge. We broke the German Operation North Wind, they call it. And then in March, around the 1st of March, the whole damn Allied army made the final big attack into Germany. And the first thing we had to go through was the Siegfried Line. And that was a line of fortifications that had big pillboxes, as big as this house. Huge things. And then trenches and barbed wire. But fortunately, they didn't have enough men to man everything. So they were pretty thinly spread. So when we attacked, the day we attacked the Siegfried Line, I lost about 40 men. But by noon, we had broken through it. And from there on, it was just a race. We were just on a German tail. We tried not to give any time to reorganize. And the German army was coming apart. That was our last big battle, was at Rupert, until we got to Schaffenburg. And that's where I faulted Patton. We got up into this 40 miles or so from the city of Schaffenburg, which is on the Main River. It's called the Main River. Schaffenburg was a town, maybe of 50,000 people. Pretty good sized town. So one night, the division commander came up, and they told our colonel that he wanted him to send a battalion on ahead of the division immediately, because we had word that the Patton's Third Army had taken a bridge across the river at Schaffenburg, a railroad bridge, that they had planked it over, got some timber somewhere, and they were running vehicles across the railroad bridge. That's the word we got. And the town of Schaffenburg had been cleared by Patton's army, the Third Army. Well, we assumed that to be the case. It turned out that wasn't the case at all. What happened was that Patton, they suddenly changed the goddamn boundaries between the Third Army and the Seventh Army. And now Schaffenburg was in our zone, from there on, with Schaffenburg on, Third Army pulled off to the left. But until the night before that, Schaffenburg was in the third division, the Third Army sector. And the word I got the next day then was I was to get trucks and move the battalion and one artillery battery up to Schaffenburg and outpost the high ground above it until the division could catch up. It would make a coordinated attack on Germany. Well, I didn't think anything of it. The next morning, here came the trucks, and I put my battalion on the trucks, and we took off about 40 miles. Drove up to the ridge line that overlooked the valley where the river was, and I stopped the convoy there, and I said, I better have a look. I got out and I got my field glasses out. I looked up and down the valley and I looked at the Schaffenburg. I couldn't see anything. Not one goddamn movement. I thought, oh, something wrong here. If the Third Army took that place, there should be some Third Army troops. So I detrucked. And we had about 1,000 yards to go on foot to the bridge. We just marched up to the goddamn bridge. Didn't get any fire at all. And then we started across the bridge and we started getting some fire. I thought, what the goddamn hell? Well, I got one company across the bridge and I found right under the bridge, right next to it, was a reconnaissance troop from the Third Army, a captain. And he had some armored cars, which are worthless, you know. You take a BB gun and knock those things out. Anyway, he had a reconnaissance troop of armored cars. And I talked to him, and I said, what's going on here, Captain? He says, well, Colonel, a hell of a lot of Germans still here in Aschaffenburg. And the German civilians tell us there's at least 5,000. Oh, God, I got 1,000 troops, you know. I thought, well, I don't know. I radioed back anyway and said, information I have is 5,000 German troops here. But I went ahead and launched the attack. I found out there was 5,000. Jesus Christ. Boy, we ran into a storm. This captain got on his crew and he took off. He said I was ordered to stay here until relieved and guard the bridge. So I said, well, I guess you're relieved. So he took off, went back, and I guess eventually joined the Third Army. Then I jumped off and ran into all kind of hell. And I could quickly see that I was outnumbered badly. So I radioed frantically back to the division and said, I'm running into problems. There's no way I can take this area with one battalion. So I got word back, okay, the rest of the regiment would come up the next morning. So we dug in that night, and the next morning the rest of the regiment came in, and we then got a coordinated attack, and we just slugged our way through that city. Took us 7 days. City fighting is tough. Because they're shooting at you from windows and doors, and it's very close fighting. You can't use your artillery. What the hell are you fighting? 100 feet apart, 200 feet apart. You can't use artillery, so you just got to go with your riflemen. And then the three battalions, we just all were committed, and it took us a full 7 days to finally root out all the Germans. Kill them or root them out.
Now, were you taking prisoners all this time? I mean, how did you handle the prisoner situation?
Well, we were taking a few there, not many. We had a system. We always sent 1 or 2 men back with the prisoners. We also always had what we call a PW collecting point. It was designated by the division. At some point we were to take prisoners. We'd get them back to that point, and then the division military police would take the prisoners over at that point. So if whatever prisoners we took, 2 or 3, with some man back with them, they usually never gave us any problem. When I surrendered, they never gave us any problem. They were damn glad to surrender, I would say.
By this time, were you noticing that the Germans were fighting with younger kids?
Yes, they had a lot of younger and a lot of older ones too. Some old bastards looked like to me they were 45 or 50 years old, but not well trained. And the German army was just disintegrating. They put up a pretty good fight there in Aschaffenburg, but only because they were fortified in various big buildings. And we just had to root them out. What I would do is locate several Germans, and I had tanks. And those tanks would, knock down windows and doors and buildings. Without the tanks, I would have been hard pressed. But the tanks, generally, when we could locate a German strong port, I'd bring in 2 or 3 tanks and just blast that. Tanks can do a lot of damage, firing high explosive stuff. They can knock down a building in a few minutes. And then what Germans are in there, they're coming out waving white flags and handkerchiefs. But anyway, it was slow, and it took us a week. And finally, there was a German major that was commanding the goddamn garrison. He'd been in Germany and been wounded, or in Russia. And he ended up in command of Schaffenburg. And he's put out a proclamation that everybody was to fight until death. And 2 of his officers wanted to surrender, and he had them hung. They were hanging there when we got there with a sign on them. This is the reward for cowards. 2 we found German officers hung. Well, finally on the last day, we dropped some leaflets over the city, telling the Germans that if they didn't surrender, we were going to just bring in a bunch of bombers and bomb the place to nothing if they didn't surrender. So they had captured an American soldier sometime during the fighting. They sent him out and said he got word to us that they were ready to surrender. So a regiment had a lieutenant who could speak German. They sent him up to take the surrender. What was left of the German people were in what they call an old walled city. Well, Schaffenburg was a very ancient city. Had an old thing built probably by the Romans, what they call a walled city. And this lieutenant went up there and got out, and this von Lambert was a German major. Von Lambert wouldn't surrender to him. He wasn't going to surrender to any lieutenant. So the lieutenant radioed back, and I'm the closest senior officer to the old city. I get word that I'm to go up there. So I got in my Jeep, only 3 blocks away. I drove up there, and old von Lambert came out, saluted. He was all spick and span, He had his pistol belt in his hand and handed it to me. Then he had all these officers come out. They all dropped their pistols at my feet. So, of course, I got an interpreter, kid Germany, born in Germany, American soldier, was with me all the time. And I had him yakking with von Lambert. Well, there were still a few strong points, and so I told my soldier, you tell the major that he's got to go with me, and we're going to all these remaining strong points. And he arrived with me in my Jeep, and we'll go to these strong points. He knows where they are. And he's to get out and tell them to surrender. Okay. He got in, and we went to 3 different places. He got out, walked up to a building, and he yacked at them in German. They all came out. That was the end of the battle. And the people of Schaffenburg are still mad at him because they figure he was responsible for a lot of damage, which he was. They should have just surrendered when we got there. Some last time we were over there, some newspaper owner owned a newspaper there. He wanted to talk with me, and I met with him, and they're still bitter at this Von Lambert. He wanted to get some details of what happened. They're still very bitter at Von Lambert. And they had a big party for us. And this group that I was with, that was 93, I think it was, 10, 12 years ago anyway, had a party for us. We had cookies and cocktails. And the mayor of Schaumburg could speak pretty good English. He made a little speech, and I made a little speech. And he told me that this mayor, his daughter had married some American officer. Was back in the States at that time. He'd gone back to the States with the guy. He says, "We hope the Americans never leave here." Because we had at that time, we had a brigade, an infantry brigade stationed in the Schaumburg. He says, "God, that's half our economy. We don't want to lose them." What the hell we're doing in Germany, I don't know to this day. You got no business there. Absolutely no business there. What the hell are we doing in Germany? You know, we got several thousand, a good many thousand troops in Germany. Who are we protecting from what? Idiocy. We got a weirdest goddamn policy of occupying the world. We're going to have to get out of it. Like Korea. Hell, we got several 100,000 troops in Korea. We got a whole army there. What the fuck are we doing in Korea? I don't give a shit what happens to the Koreans. Let the Northern take them over. Who cares? We got a good whole army tied up there.
After Aschaffenburg,
Do we need to take a break? Are you getting really warm? Or you want a glass of water again?
No. Well, after Aschaffenburg, it got pretty easy. We barreled right along and we got to Nuremberg. Now that's a very large city. And the Germans had a lot of troops in there. So it took us 3 days. They fought all the way. And we cleared them out block by block. 3 days it took us. It wasn't that they had so many troops there, they were just hard to root them out of those buildings. And they defended every building they were in. I had a near escape. One morning I had orders to attack down some street there that led to, we had good maps, we had German maps, we had good maps. A street that led to the old opera house. They had an opera house in the middle of Nuremberg. I think I have a lot of it. So I put a company on each side of the street, a rifle company, and one following it. And I just rode in my Jeep following them. And they disappeared in all the buildings, and I overshot the lead company. And we're just barely creeping along in my Jeep, and I'm looking at the street signs, which are nearly all knocked down, trying to figure out where we were, and then all of a sudden I looked up, I saw that opera house with a great big green roof on it. I said, "Uh-oh, to my driver, I think we've gone too far." He stopped, and just that time, I was leaning. We didn't have any, windshields on our vehicles during the war. We didn't use windshields. I had my map spread out on the hood of the Jeep, city map I was looking at. And a machine gun burst went right under my arm. Went right into the back, and I had 3 men back there. My rifleman, a radio operator, and an interpreter. Then me in the front, and the Jeep, and the driver. Went right under my arm. Didn't hit a man, but went right between one man in the middle. Went right between his feet. put a big hole in the Jeep. Of course, we bailed out like crazy and ran over and got in the buildings on the side, and I never got another berth at it. But then I had to go back and find my rifle company. I couldn't go back and get the damn Jeep. So we went on back a little way. We come to the lead rifle company. I said, no, move it, move it, move it. We got to get my Jeep. And the Germans had pulled out of the upper house in the meantime. Got back, my Jeep was gone. God damn it. Had all my personal gear in there. Some letters from my wife. Anyway, the son of a bitches got away with my Jeep. Another day or so, we had Nuremberg cleaned up. Then, right after Nuremberg, I was designated as a task force commander. We had intelligence, as it turned out it was no good, that Hitler was going to pull back to Bergstadt, which is not far from Munich. Munich is the major city in Bavaria, a very large city. And so we were hurrying to get to Bergstadt before the German army could reform. Turned out that utter crap. Intelligence was no good. Anyway, we were going to barrel to Munich, and so I was the task force commander for our division. And I was given a whole battalion of tanks, 2 battalions of artillery, and 2 engineer companies. And I was to seize bridges and move like hell if I could. So I took off. And, made about 20, 30 miles a day. Had an awful lot of firepower. The Germans would have some bridges guarded. They either give up or take off right away. Then we got close to the Danube River, which is the big river there. It was just getting dark. The Danube River was about 6 miles away. Well, I had the trouble with tanks. Fuel doesn't last long, you know. They can't go very far. They have to refuel. God damn it. I think it takes about a gallon of gas a mile. Anyway, I had stopped to refuel the damn tanks. And it was about 11 o'clock. I had to get the tankers up and get the refuel over. About 11 o'clock at night before I got all the tanks refueled. I decided I'd make a night attack on a big bridge that was ahead of me across the Danube. So I took off, and once I got refueled, hadn't gone more than a mile, blew it. The whole sky turned red. The Germans blew the bridge up. Oh, I pulled in there, no problem, except there's no bridge there. So I had some engineer company with some boats. I got a rifle company across, and went down above the bridge, and then went down to where the bridge was to outpost it. And then I got the engineer company up with a ponton bridge company. Right after daylight, they started working on putting in a ponton bridge. It took them about 3 hours. And we got the ponton bridge across, no problem. Then I got my whole battalion across, and that's when then that night, I guess it was, I got word we were getting close to Munich. And I was 30 or 40 miles from Munich that night. And I got word over the radio that it went to all units. Tomorrow we're approaching the concentration camp at Dachau. You're to be, sense the area, it said, a radio message. Try to seize all records that you can. Do not destroy any records. So I didn't pay a hell of a lot of attention to it. Nobody heard of Dachau. What the hell, we never heard about we didn't know what a concentration camp was. We had never been informed or trained or anything about them. So I didn't pay a hell of a lot of attention to it. Well, the next morning I was within striking distance of Munich. So daylight I jumped off with 2 rifle companies and my tanks and an assault on Munich. Well, we ran into quite a bit of fire, but we made good progress, and around 11 o'clock that day I got an urgent message on my radio. It says, "You are to proceed immediately to the concentration camp at Dachau, to seize it, seal it off, and let no one in or out." That's the way the message read. Well, I was pissed off, because that meant dividing up my battalion, you see. From a combat view, combat operation, that's a poor thing to do. Well, I was mad. I thought, why can't somebody else take the goddamn concentration camp? Anyway, I hadn't committed my one rifle company. I had it in reserve, I company. So I radioed the battalion commander, or the company commander, gave him a spot at a road junction for him to meet me. He came up in a little while. And I said, I don't know what the hell we're running into, but we got to take this concentration camp. I looked on my map, and it was about a mile off to my left, on the edge of the city of Dachau. The city of Dachau is a community of maybe 30,000, pretty good sized town. I don't know, 30,000 maybe, something like that. A river ran down through it. Small river. Anyway, I said, I don't know what we're running into, but you got to take that concentration camp, and I'll give you an extra machine gun platoon from a heavy weapons company to go with you, and I'll go with you. So we took off. They say it's only about a mile away. And we got to where we could see the camp, but we couldn't tell what it was. This looked like an ordinary garrison from the outside. It was surrounded by a cement or brick fence about 8 or 10 feet high. And the main road running into the camp, there was a big gate. It was closed. And I decided if the Germans are going to shoot at all, they're going to have that gate guarded. So I sent the company, I said, take off around the left here and figure out some way to get into the camp without going down this main street. So the company commander took off, and right away they ran into a railway track. I had about 40 some odd railway cars on it. And it was all full of human bodies, every car, all dead. What a mess. Men and women both, mostly men with a few women. And the men got pretty mad. Some were insane things. Some cursed. I said, okay, we're going in the camp. And they went on in through the railway, where the railway went in. We took that route. Then got in, and to the best of my knowledge, the Germans didn't put up any resistance at all. The men claimed they got fired at here and there, but I don't know. I followed them. And that's all we were doing, and it was searching a lot of buildings in there. This thing covered 100 acres or so, the whole camp. And we didn't come to the concentration camp itself until the far corner of the camp. There was a barbed wire area, covered maybe 4 or 5 acres. A big barbed wire fence, the guard tower about every 200 yards with a machine gun in it. We rooted out quite a few Germans. They were starting to hide. And we picked up some prisoners. The Germans had, for lack of a better word, I call them trustees, prisoners. The Germans used prisoners to do all the dirty work, cleaning and handling the bodies. And then we came to the concentration camp itself. Still no fire from the Germans. And then we found a couple of crematoriums. They weren't operating, but they had big coal-fired furnaces in them. Then one room was about the half the size of this living room, cement building, full of bodies, stacked in like cordwood, one on top of the other, all naked and all terribly emaciated. I don't know, maybe 100 of them in there. Well, that took us back, I'll tell you.
How did you react to German soldiers before you were at Dachau and then after Dachau?
Didn't have any hard feelings at all, none at all. I think we all felt the poor bastards are caught just like we were, you know. They didn't have any choice. They caught on that Nazi machine. What choice did they have? They were told to fight and they fought. We were told to fight and we fought. So we never had, I don't think anybody ever had any hard feelings, except at Dachau. My company commander was running around and was yelling, "You bastards, you bastards, you bastards!" He went crazy.
It must have been a shock to see those bodies.
Oh, hell, and the smell. A lot of them have been dead for days and had maggots all over them. The smell was something else. It was very unnerving. Some guys cried, some cursed, and some didn't say anything. And we went on, and what I didn't know was that a goddamn general from the 42nd Division came in. I didn't see him. Well, he came in the main gate and drove right up to the entrance to the prison area, which had a big double locked gate. And the Germans, and I don't know what happened, but the Germans and a couple of the guard towers came down. I'm sure they came down, and I didn't see it. I didn't know what happened. I'm sure they surrendered. And then this small party from the 42nd got panicky and shot them. Well, my men came, lead platoon, came along just at the time they were shooting the Germans. And I think it panicked this goddamn general. We caught him shooting prisoners of war. They took off. I didn't know it. I didn't see them. Well, we took over the camp, and we put guards out all over the place, and everything was well under control. And here came the 42nd back, 3 jeeps. And this lead jeep was General Linden, Brigadier General, who was Assistant Division Commander of the 42nd. I knew him. I had seen him before. Behind him was a woman in a jeep and a driver, a sergeant. And behind him was a lieutenant colonel in a jeep. So they come driving up. I was standing there by the gate. I say everything was very calm at that point. And the general said, the woman got out of the jeep. She said, this lady would like to interview the prisoners. She wants to go in there. I said, oh no. If she opens that gate, look at, by that time all the prisoners realized what was going on and they were pressed up against the gate. As far as we could see, it was people.
A couple thousand?
32,000.
32,000.
It turned out. So I said, no, she can't open that gate. Well, he said, I'll take charge here and I'll be responsible. I said, no, you don't. This is my territory. You got no business here. That woman's not going to open that gate. While I'm arguing with him, she comes out of the Jeep and she runs up to the gate and opens the goddamn thing. Had a crossbar on it. And the prisoners started surging forward. Well, I yelled at my men, start shooting, start shooting. Shoot over their heads. Charge the gate and close it. And about 4 or 5 men started firing their rifles in the air, charged the gate, and got it closed. And the woman got scared and she ran back. And I said, now, General, I want you and your party to get out of here right now. And she said to me, I want to interview, there's some prisoners in here I want to interview. I don't know, she said Cardinal Niemoller was one name she gave me. I don't think he was a cardinal, I don't know what the hell he was. He's some kind of high guy in the Lutheran church anyway. Had been at Dachau, I wasn't there when we got there. The Prince of Luxembourg. And one other name she gave me I didn't catch. And I said, lady, I don't give a damn who's in there. I don't know if they're there. It turned out they weren't. None of them were there. They moved all the high-ranking people out several days before we arrived. The ship moved them to Austria. I said, anyway, I don't know anything about it, but you're not going in there. The general says, I'm relieving you. I'll take command here. I said, no, you're not. And I said to one of my private, I said, escort the general and his party back out the gate. Well, this kid didn't know quite what to do. He was a private. He kind of stepped forward. He raised his rifle like Port Arms and stepped forward. And this general had a little, I don't know, riding crop or some goddamn little thing. He carried, I guess, as his badge of authority. He whapped the kid over his helmet with a riding crop or whatever it was. Didn't hurt the kid. Rang his bell a little bit. That did it. I just exploded. I hauled out my 45 and I said, you son of a bitch. You touch another one of my men, I'll kill you right here. Yeah, he got a little pale. And he said, all right, I'll leave, but I'll see you before a general court-martial. He left. That started a whole chain of events. So they left and we got everything quieted down. And I immediately radioed back. I said, we desperately need medical help up here, and food as rapidly as we could get it because the prisoners practically were all starved to death. I don't think anybody weighed over like 95 pounds. They were just skin and bone. Every damn one of them had dysentery, typhus, and they were dying by the minute. There were a couple of hundred dead lying around inside the prison area that the Germans didn't have an opportunity to move them to the crematorium. So I got very quiet and I radioed back, we need hospitals here, quick. And then it was very calm. Our regimental commander came up. And the division commander came up, General Fredericks, Major General. And I explained to him what had happened. And General Fredericks said, oh, don't worry about that. I'll take care of that. They left, and a little while later came a lieutenant colonel from the 7th Army, Inspector General Department. And he said to me, Colonel, he said, I want you to explain to me what happened with General Linden. I said, I don't have time to sit around there and gossip with you.
I don't have time to gossip with this man.
Yeah, well, he left. And I didn't hear. Then I'm supposed to resume the attack into Munich the next morning. So I radioed the division or regimental commander, and I said, if I'm going to attack in the morning, I got one company in here. I got to get it back. He said, okay, I'll send a company up from the 1st Battalion, which was following us, and take over from you for tonight. So C Company came up then from our 1st Battalion, and I turned the camp over to them. Then I went back to my headquarters, which I hadn't never been at. It had moved up during the day into the city of Dachau. Well, I got back there about 8 o'clock at night, and I thought everything was taken care of. The C Company was all doing security duty in the camp. And oh yeah, then I just got back at my headquarters, and I got another radio message from the regiment stating that I wouldn't be attacking in the morning, that the 1st Battalion would. That I was to relieve C Company. That it just relieved me. I was pissed off. So I sent an L Company, another company, into the camp to take care of it that night and relieve C Company. And that night nothing happened, and the next morning I went on into Munich following my, I left L Company there at the camp, and I followed my other 2 companies into Munich. 1st Battalion had resumed the attack, and by nightfall we had Munich well under control. And then at noon that day came an artillery unit up from 7th Army and took over from L Company. By that time I'm getting a little weary of getting relieved and re-relieved. And the next morning the division commander came. I set up a command post and took over a big building in Munich. Set up a command post there. And next morning, the division commander came down and said, General Linden's stirring up a lot of trouble. Oh, I forgot to tell you that one of the things just before the incident with the 42nd Division happened, we lined up a bunch of prisoners against a wall, an L-shaped wall. On the other side of it was a small hospital. And this L-shaped wall was 20, 30 feet by 30 feet. And had been used as a coal bin. Had coal dust in the bottom of it. There was no coal in there. They used all their coal. Oh, that's where they stored their coal anyway. Had a little track, railroad track, like an ore car that hauled in. I guess trains come in with the coal and haul it, and I dumped it in that little L-shape. Oh, we had maybe, I don't know, 40, 50 prisoners there. And they were standing up against the wall. Then I heard some firing. That's when the 42nd firing, and I didn't know that. Heard some firing ahead of me. I took off, and I only got a few steps, and I had to set up a machine gun guarding these prisoners. Some young machine kid. And all of a sudden he cut loose. I wheeled around, and he fired a pretty good burst into that group of Germans. I ran back and kicked him in the back, knocked him off the gun. Then I grabbed him by the collar and pulled him off the gun. I said, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, "Colonel, they're trying to get away." They were milling around, but they weren't trying to get away. I don't know why the hell he pulled the trigger. But he did, and he made a mess there. He killed about 11, wounded quite a few. And then some photographers came in at that point. Got pictures of the whole goddamn thing. I don't know where the hell those damn photographers go. Everybody knew about Dachau, I guess. Press and everything. Well, photographers came in, they got pictures of all the dead guys and stuff. Lying there. So anyway, the next day is when General Fredericks came up and said, General Linden is raising a lot of problems about this. I said, I don't think there's going to be any real trouble, but the 7th Army is going to conduct a formal investigation. So I said, I'm going to send a command car down in the morning and pick you up and take you to Le Havre, France. There'll be orders there for you to go on home. He says, we're going to have to go to Japan from here, and you can join us back in the States. And I said, okay, and the next morning, well, here comes a command car. And I took my interpreter, driver, and my rifleman. The 4 of us took off for Le Havre. It was a long ways, 600-700 miles. I don't know how far. Traffic was bad, the bridges were blown. We went by Paris and got drunk. The next day I went on, it took 2 or 3 days, I wasn't in any hurry. Anyway, we got into Le Havre, and there was an office at the end of the dock there, a transportation office. Sergeant was running it. I said, I walked up to him, I said, Sergeant, I'm Colonel Sparks. I have orders to report here, and I understand the orders for me to get on a ship to go back to the States. Well, he said, I'll call my lieutenant. Well, I thought, what the hell is he calling a lieutenant for? Anyway, just a few minutes. A lieutenant came up, an MP lieutenant. Very polite. He said, Colonel, I'm sorry, but I've got orders to take you back to 7th Army headquarters. I thought, oh, shit. Well, I said, I tell you, I'll go back. You're not going to take me back, Lieutenant. I'll go back. Well, you give me your word? And I said, yes, I give you my word. Okay, he said. So I took off and we went back. And we found 7th Army headquarters. Took us 2 or 3 days. We went by Paris again and got drunk. And it took us 2 or 3 days, I don't know. I finally found 7th Army headquarters, which is not far from Munich, a little town. I reported under the G1. And he said, well, Colonel, he said, General Patton says his 3rd Army has taken over this headquarters as of today. And we're being shipped to Austria. The 42nd Division is going to be shipped back to Austria as occupation forces. So I said, well, where's General Patton headquarters? He gave me the name of some city 15 or 20 miles outside of Munich. Pretty good sized town. I said, okay, I'll go there. And I went, it was in the afternoon, sometime late in the afternoon. I found the headquarters and reported to the Chief of Staff. General Patton's out now. He'll be in the morning, and you come report to him in the morning. 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, you come report to him. So I found quarters for me and my man. And the next morning, I reported to General Patton. He was in a little office. It wasn't a very big office. Had like 2 or 3 chairs and a desk. He was sitting at his desk, and I went in and saluted. I said, "Sir, I'm Colonel Sparks. I have orders to report to you." "Oh," he said, "yes, General Sparks, or Colonel Sparks." He said, "I have some very serious charges against you and some of your men." Well, I said, "Well, I would like to explain, General." He said, "I've read all these charges." He said, "Didn't you serve under me in Africa and Sicily?" I said, "Yes, sir, I did." "Well," he said, "I've looked over these charges and they're a bunch of goddamn crap." He says, "Now I'm going to tear up these charges on you and your men. Now you go on back to your regiment." The interview lasted less than 2 minutes. I left. That's the last I ever heard of it. I did well, then they shipped me out again. Shipped me to Reims. And I was assigned to SHAFE headquarters at Reims. And I was named as the commandant of what they call a sweep sub-area. And the job was to get troops ready to ship them back to the States. The ships come in, we would figure out how many troops we could get on. That's the sole job we had at the sweep sub-area. And I never heard any more from my outfit. So troops kept coming through, and I got goddamn tired of it. Hell, I got a wife back in the States, a kid 2.5 years old I've never seen. This shipping is going to take another year at least to get all the troops out of Europe, and I'll be damned if I'm going to stay here another year. So I had the full staff, an adjutant and so on. And I said to the adjutant, "The next damn ship we get orders on, would anybody less ranked than a lieutenant colonel is going to be the commander, you put my name on that." "Okay, Colonel," he said. A few days later, he came in the office and said, "You got a group of Air Corps people being shipped back to the States, and the ranking officer is a major. He'll be the ship commander, troop commander." I said, "That's fine. You eliminate his name from the troop commander and put my name there." I didn't say a word to anybody. So 3 days later, we had word to go to Belgium to catch the ship, Antwerp, a Liberty ship. So I got on the trucks with the rest of them and went to Antwerp and went on board the ship. Nobody said a goddamn word. I was a troop commander. Had my own stateroom. Got to eat with the captain. He had his own little dining room. And then we took off. Those things made all of 10 or 12 knots. It took us about 3 weeks, for Christ's sake, to get back to the States. This captain and I and a couple of other officers played bridge the whole time. I couldn't play bridge worth a damn. And nobody ever knew the difference. I was gone, nobody knew it. Got back to the States, and then I went at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. We landed in New York. They trucked us to Camp Kilmer. Then I'm put in charge of a railway train. It's going to travel around the country and drop troops off at various army posts where they're going to all go on leave, you see. We're still at war with Japan at that time. So we took off and, I don't know, went to Chicago and other places. Finally got to San Antonio, Texas. Big army post there. And there then, I got rid of the last of the troops except me and a couple other guys. We were going to all go on leave, and I was from Arizona. So I was going to go on leave from Fort Bliss and El Paso. So we got bus tickets. And I called my wife and said, she's in Arizona. I said, we're going to be in Fort Bliss tomorrow morning sometime. Go to El Paso and get a hotel room. She did. And we got into Bliss. I stayed at Bliss that night. And the next morning I got some sedan and took me to the hotel room, or to the hotel. My wife had called and said she had a room in the hotel. I met her. We had a joyous reunion. And then I had to go back to get my leave papers and get a 90-day leave. And so I said, I told the adjutant for Bliss, I want to get out of this goddamn Army. I was in college when I got drafted and I want to go back. "Oh, I'm sorry, Colonel." He said, "We don't have any order to release anybody." Oh, well, the day that I got to Fort, met my wife that morning, that turned out to be VJ Day. Everything in El Paso closed. The restaurants, everybody was hooting and hollering and honking their horns and couldn't find a place to eat. Well, anyway, the next morning, my wife and I went back out to the post. I said, "The war's over now, I want to get out." And the adjutant said, "Well, I'm sorry, Colonel, we don't have order authority, but we anticipate we will." I said, "Well, as soon as you get authority, you send me a telegram." I gave him my wife's address in Arizona, and we took off. 2 or 3 days later, I got a telegram. You can now be discharged from the Army. Went back to Bliss, got discharged. Came up here and started school at the University of Colorado. Went summer and all. Everybody in my class was only about 30 in my law class. All veterans. And we went summer and all, so we didn't waste any time. Hell, we're all like 30 years old by then. Oldest bunch of law students in history. We went summer and all. And it took us only 2 years to graduate, 2.5 years to graduate that way. Then I started practicing law. Been here ever since. I've done very well.
I've got a couple of questions here, and then we can see if you've got a couple to finish off here, Dan. You had been in the Army before the war, and then you dealt with a lot of draftee soldiers after the war started. How do you feel the draftee soldiers did compared to the guys who were supposedly the professionals?
Just as good. You know, I had my background was regular Army, and all the sergeants in those days had been in the Army a long time. 10 or 12 years anyway, and some 15 or 20 years. Weren't really motivated very much. And they were efficient. They knew their jobs, but didn't have any enthusiasm about it. Most of them, most of them had never completed high school. Hell, a lot of them were from coal mine areas of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and fathers were coal miners. Very few of them even had a high school education. Then when I went in the National, I wasn't happy when I was assigned to a National Guard outfit. I wasn't happy at all. Oh, Jesus Christ. I didn't know anything about the National Guard. And I was very pleasantly surprised, because here now we had all the kids had been to high school, and they knew each other, very intelligent, highly motivated. So they performed better than what I've been used to in the regular Army. I was quite surprised.
do you think of the all-volunteer Army today?
I think it's a good Army today. We've changed our practices a hell of a lot. Everybody's much better trained than they ever were before. The National Guard particularly had very little training. They drilled once a week, 2 hours, or once a month. 2 hours a month is all they drilled at night. Like Monday night or Tuesday night. And then they went to summer camp for 2 weeks every year. That's all the training they got. And the officers, none of them were really graduates of the infantry school. They didn't have a chance to go to a military school. They didn't used to offer those to the National Guard. So the officers were poorly trained. And the captains were all in their 30s and 40s. They were too goddamn old to be infantrymen. And of course, once war was declared, the Army really went into a house cleaning. We got rid of all of our old captains. And everybody then got a chance to go to the infantry school, where I happened to be there when the Japs hit Pearl Harbor. So we suddenly, today's Army, we have a mandatory promotion system. You get a commission. Today, you have to have a college degree to get a commission in the Guard or anywhere else today. You gotta have a college degree. And then you have to, within 3 years, you have to complete the basic course for your branch, artillery, infantry, MPs, whatever. You have to go to the infantry school, which makes it a little hard for civilians. Well, if you don't complete that infantry school or the basic course within 3 years, you're terminated. And you're forever barred from coming back in the Army. Once you get your basic course behind you and you get promoted, that takes you up to the grade of captain. Then to get major or above, you have to complete the advanced course. There eliminates a lot of other civilians. Get the major or above, major to lieutenant colonel, you have to complete the advanced course for that branch. Once you get to be a major, then if you want to get any higher, colonel, general, you have to go to Command and General Staff College, which is Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So a hell of a lot of educational requirements. If you don't make any of those, you're out. There's no excuses. So we have an officers board that meets every year and reviews every officer's record. And the years go by and you didn't make it, you're terminated right then. So the officer corps is well trained. And the enlisted people, even in the Guard today, they have to go off to active duty, even a private, which didn't exist before the war. They didn't go anywhere. But today we enlist a private in the Guard. He goes off to the basic training, whatever branch he's in. So they're all well trained today. Much better trained than ever been in history.
Let me ask you one question. I commented on it earlier on. World War II is often remembered as the good war. There have been books written about it. What's your attitude about that? Was World War II the good war?
Well, compared to other wars, yes. There ain't no good war. There's no such thing. Stupidity, utter stupidity. Why the hell people want to kill other people? I don't know. Well, you always got some sons of bitches like Hitler, Saddam Hussein, always the fucker in Russia, whatever his name was. You always got those kind of guys that are able to manipulate people to take command of a country. Doesn't seem possible. How did Hitler come out of nowhere and take over Germany? But the facts of the time dictate, you know, Germany was in bad shape after World War I. High unemployment. They had to pay reparations. Money got to be worthless. You know, I collect stamps. Christ, you got stamps that are in the millions of marks. Millions! A mark today is worth, oh, I don't know, 90 cents or something. Money got to be worthless, and the German people just had a pretty hopeless feeling. So they were easy to manipulate. But you got to have people that can be manipulated. And how Saddam Hussein done it, I don't know. Well, I can understand it. All those Arab nations have been ruled by a king from time immemorial. You know, kings ain't very good either. And so they've been ruled by a king who doesn't treat them very well. So some son of a bitch like Saddam Hussein, we're going to have a better world if I'm running it, see? That's how they do it. But you have to have a people that can be manipulated. It'd be hard to manipulate the people here. In this country, people do fight about everything, disagree about everything. We got all kind of people disagree. I just saw on TV some guy shooting up City Hall in New York today. They got nuts all over, and plenty of weapons. This business of letting everybody carry a concealed weapon is a form of insanity. My grandson was murdered. Well, a 15-year-old kid with a handgun. And I went on a drive then to get a law passed. The best I could do was to get a law passed that kids under 18 could not carry handguns. Up until that time, you get a 12-year-old kid go to school with carry a pistol. Nobody could do anything about it. I had a hell of a time. I got an organization going, and they call it Punch. People United, No Children's Handguns. And I got a pretty good committee going, some legislators, and a minister or two, some prominent people. My wife and I put up $25,000, and I raised about another 25. I put out leaflets and sent stuff to people around the state, ads in newspapers to support this legislation that I wrote. I went to the governor, Roy Romer, and I got him to agree to call a special session of the legislature. Of course, at a special session, you can't consider anything except what the governor puts on the call. So that's all the legislature could do was to consider the legislation that I wrote. And I made it a crime for anybody under 18 to be caught carrying a handgun. Serious crime. And we set up a boot camp for the first time in the same session. I worked like hell on that day and night, testified. All that time, that goddamn National Rifle Association fighting me over every step of the way. They figure everybody should be carrying a gun. They make money out of it, of course. They're supported by gun dealers and gun manufacturers. They get all kind of money. They contribute money to the legislators and the congressmen constantly, every election. They put out millions of dollars. I got the records from the state secretary of state from Washington to see who from our state got money. What I found out was that they don't contribute to the Democrats, just Republicans. All our Republican congressmen get about $4,000 or $5,000 a year. NRA, the local people don't get that much, usually around 500 already. Anybody run on a Republican ticket, you get about 500. And they got a full-time lobby here in the legislature. They shipped 2 guys in here from Washington to try to beat when we had a special session, a man and a woman. Well, we outmaneuvered them. I had some friends in the legislature too. I've been fairly influential in this. I'm a former Supreme Court justice. I commanded the Army National Guard. So I had a lot of friends in the legislature, some Republicans too. They helped me out to beat hell. I'm a Democrat. But I had some Republican legislators who really went to bat. You get the law passed, and we rolled over that NRA like they didn't know what hit them.
Thanks very much for
Didn't bring my grandson back. He's twin boys, one on the outside, the top outside, the one got shot through the head. That killed us. It hurt. Still hurts. Well, I ain't got much longer to live. I've far outlived what I thought. Hell, I'll be 86 years old in a couple of weeks.
You don't look a day over 85 to me.
Yeah. So I started putting out a quarterly newsletter and having a 3-day reunion, not one night, and all over the United States, so that, because we had members from all over the United States. We met in Boston and Chicago, and San Diego, you name it. Florida, Texas. Every year we met in a different place, and I spent a lot of time organizing it.
Yeah.
I'd get bids from hotels, and then I'd go there and check out hotels and get the one with several months in advance and pick out the one with the best accommodation, the best price, and certain things I demanded, like I wanted our own free hospitality room where we could serve our own drinks. Screw that paying $3 or $4 a drink, for a hotel. Yeah. I had more problem with that than anything.
I bet.
I said, okay, you either take out it or we don't get our business. It's that simple. So eventually it would all break down and give me a big, nice hospitality room. And I'd go out and buy the liquor at the cheapest source. And finally I got to where I'd hire bartenders from the hotel. And I had it down to a pretty good science. We did that every year. Then I put out a quarterly newsletter in which I described what happened. I had a column 40 years ago. I kept a list of deaths and all pertinent information about the regiment via 8 or 10 page newsletter. And I would mail that out then to all the members every quarter.
Nice.
And I started charging $10 for dues, which didn't quite cover it, but mailing, I mail everything first class. As you go to that second class, third class crap, you got to haul it down to the post office and break it down a zip code. I said, screw that.
Well, one other question, I don't know if you want to get into it while we're still here, and then we'll wrap up. Do you want to talk about what you've done working with survivors of the Holocaust through the years and dealing from your experience at Dachau?
Well, I don't know how long ago it was when Governor Lamb was governor. We started I think nationwide, we started having a national Holocaust Day.
President Jimmy Carter started that.
Yeah, I don't know who started. Anyway, the first meeting I went to was in the governor's mansion. He had about 15 or 20 survivors. At that time, I didn't know anybody that was a survivor. Had done nothing about it. I went to that meeting and explained what I knew about it. And then I got on a number of TV programs, radio programs, and I was sorry because in a way I'd started getting a lot of hate mail. I'm a Jew lover. and get a lot of hate mail, letters, anonymous letters. And it's kind of died down now, but for a long time. Then I went to various meetings, California, Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas. I spoke to various groups, paid my own expenses all the time. I'm pretty well heeled financially. I don't have any financial problems at all. So for a year, and I went to schools, a number of schools here in Colorado. Until the last few years, now I can't do it. I just can't really move around. I stopped. I don't do anymore. Just can't do anymore. Hell will get old.